busy news night. We just heard Commissioner Bratton explain his comments about why it's hard to hire black police officers. And let's discuss it right now with our panel. Two great folks. Shelley Mayer is a Democratic Assemblywoman representing Yonkers. Mayo Bartlett is an attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett. And he's also the former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County District Attorney's Office. So, Assemblywoman, I'll start with you. Now, you know I'm going to find a way to get in Albany before you leave here tonight.
I'm sure you will.
Time is short. But I want, before you talk about Mr. Bratton, let's talk about the story of the hour in which one of the two men that broke out of prison 3 weeks ago has been shot. The other one is still, as of right now, on the run. Your reaction to this?
Well, I'm very concerned for the communities in which this is taking place. One of my colleagues in the Assembly represents that community, and every day over the last few weeks, she has been on the phone at home with folks who are petrified. You know, they have officers in their backyard and the kids can't go out, and you know, we haven't locked down and we have these people on the loose, and I hope that we are doing everything to preserve the safety of the communities in which this is occurring. And obviously, you know, this one gentleman, the one other guy is still on the loose, and I'm concerned about a resolution. I mean, I'd like to see people be brought to justice. That's my preference. Go to a trial. We don't know the facts of what happened here.
Sir?
Well, I agree 100%. I think that you want to make sure that if the people are not presenting a threat, that they're arrested and they're brought to justice. You don't want to see someone simply shot and killed because they've created so much inconvenience and because people are afraid of them. So if the gentleman had a gun and he was doing something that caused his own death, then that's understandable. But if not, even as a convicted homicide, perpetrator, he shouldn't have been shot and killed. So we don't have all the facts, but I definitely do. Yes,
you put
absolutely.
it nicely to most people.
Murderer. But as a murderer, if Charlie Manson is sitting here and he's
Understood.
not threatening anybody, he shouldn't get shot and killed. If he's doing something else, even if a great person's doing something else, then that's a different story if there's a basis for the action.
Okay, let's talk about Mr. Bratton. I almost hit the president. That's the next segment. That's the next segment. Let's talk about Mr. Bratton. You each have watched what he had to say. I'll start with you. I was going to say counselor, but both of you have law degrees and you're an elected official. So counselor on this side, did Mr. Bratton ease any concerns that you may have as being on the front line of fighting alleged police brutality?
None, absolutely none of them. And in fact, Mr. Bratton suggested it's difficult to hire African Americans because so many have been convicted. Well, there's a huge percentage of white people who have criminal convictions as well, and those people generally are not applying to become police officers. So if you have outreach, you can find candidates. I think that there is an issue in terms of pay, but that's an issue that's not just for African American candidates, that's for all candidates. And we were speaking before, before we came on, about the need to increase the pay so that you remove overtime. You don't want your police officers working double shifts. You don't want there to be a financial incentive to make arrests. But when you stop and you look at the fact that the NYPD was considering candidates based upon whether they had been stopped and frisked, that premise is totally unacceptable. And the fact that that has been removed from the application is nice, but it's something that should never have been there in the first place.
Okay, but it happened under one of his predecessors. You're not willing to give him credit for removing something that was apparently wrong?
Well, I will say this. I'll give credit for removing that part of it, but he's the person who orchestrated stop and frisk in the first place.
Here's what I think. I give him a lot of credit for recognizing and taking very seriously the need to diversify the police department in New York City, and I know in Yonkers it's an issue that I care about, and I've talked at length with our commissioner about it. We have some crisis of confidence in our communities of color, and I don't think we can walk away and just put our head down, which I see some in the police community do. Bratton has not done that. I give him credit for that. I think you need leadership at the top that says we are going to deal with this problem. Is every step going to be the way I would do it? I'm not a police commissioner nor a police officer and nor an expert in policing, but I think the commitment to diversity in our police department is absolutely essential, and you need leadership that conveys the respect that has diminished in some communities and has led to the real crisis in confidence. We got to address it.
One of the problems that we've had, and again, this is his second tour, basically, as the police commissioner, is that we continue to recycle officers who should not be on that force. Doesn't matter what color they are, what their background may be. If I am a repeat offender for misconduct, It's time for me to no longer be a law enforcement officer. And as we were talking earlier, there are lots of young men and women who would love to do this job, who would be phenomenal at this job, who don't get a shot at it, don't get a bite at the apple. And you see already that we're not taking new applicants because people have waited for such a long time and they can't get their foot in the door. Now, what we're not addressing is the number of officers who have misconduct, who have complaints that stack up to here, who continue to be allowed to work as law enforcement officers. And we're constantly told, you know, you don't have a right to that job. You don't have a right to virtually any job. It's a privilege, and it's a job where we give you the public trust. We expect you to be the best. We expect you to be the finest. And when you're not, then really it's a disservice not only to the community but to your fellow officers when you have a commissioner and a mayor that allow those people to continue to stay in their position.
Assemblywoman, I've got to take a break in one second here. Mr. Bratton also quoting him, the demonstrations in New York over police brutality went too far. When you're chanting, what do we want, dead cops, what do you end up with? Dead cops. Is he right?
I think this, you know, hateful speech is something that's protected in the United States. It is very, very difficult, having spoken to a number of my police officers' friends, to maintain a professional attitude in the face of that speech. And there may be a line one crosses where it's no longer acceptable. I tend to err on the side that the speech itself, absent conduct, does not lend itself to a different kind of policing than speech. I think it's a very tough line.
Okay, I've got to take a break. I see you want to respond. Can you make it quick?
I sure will. And all I'll say is this. You can cherry pick language from anybody. You can look at Ferguson. There were individual officers who were 100% inappropriate. The vast majority of the officers during the protests were not. So you don't take that one officer.
But no one should be walking around talking about we want
You
dead
can't
cops.
stop what people are saying, and you can't attribute one person who's out of control to an entire movement. And that's what's happened here. You allow that to be commandeered.
Okay, on that note, it is time for a break. Much more coming up. We will have, for example, Reverend Pinckney, who was laid to rest today, and President Obama delivered the eulogy.